The first thing she said wasn't a question. It was a command, quiet, measured, and laced with something I couldn't quite name. Close the blinds. The room was already dim, the late evening sun casting soft slants of gold across the office wall, but her voice made the air shift. I stood by the window, one hand hesitating near the cord. I could feel her gaze, steady and unflinching, from behind the desk. My throat tightened. I obeyed. The blinds tilted shut with a low rattle, and suddenly the world outside disappeared. It was just the two of us, me, 23, trying to steady my breath, and her, 45, with a presence that filled every corner of the room. She leaned back in her chair, elegant in a black blouse that shimmered faintly under the desk lamp. Her posture was confident, almost regal, yet her fingers tapped lightly against the armrest as though betraying a thought she wouldn't speak aloud. I'd worked under her for months, and I thought I knew her, composed, unreachable, the kind of woman who never let her guard slip. But tonight, something was different. Better, she murmured, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. That look, steady, piercing, almost too long to be professional, sent a current through me. I wasn't sure if I imagined the softness at the corner of her mouth, the almost imperceptible pause before she spoke again. I crossed the room slowly, my steps sounding too loud in the hush that had settled between us. She shifted in her chair, her hand brushing against a file she hadn't opened, then letting it fall back down like she'd lost interest in pretending she was working. I sat opposite her, though every part of me wanted to close the distance further. Her perfume lingered in the air, subtle and warm, and when she leaned forward just slightly, I caught it stronger. It wasn't the scent that undid me, though, it was the way her eyes held mine, unwavering, as if she was daring me not to look away. "You've been quiet lately," she said, her tone casual but her voice lower than usual. I swallowed, unsure if she wanted an answer or if she was simply testing the space between us. Just, focused. Her smile was small, knowing. Focused. I see. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, pulsing, charged. I noticed her fingers again, how they toyed with the pen on her desk, spinning it lightly, then stopping as though she realized I was watching. She set it down, slowly, deliberately, like every movement was meant to be seen. I glanced at the blinds, now sealed shut. The thought crossed my mind, she'd wanted this moment sealed off from everything else, the world outside kept at bay. Her hand drifted across the desk, brushing against a folder, then stilled just inches from mine. I didn't move, afraid even a breath would shatter the balance we had stumbled into. Her skin was close enough that the warmth reached me. My heart hammered, not because of what she'd done, but because of what she hadn't yet done. Her lips parted, as if she were about to speak, but no words came. Instead, she held me in that gaze, and the seconds stretched unbearably long. My fingers twitched, aching to close the gap, to touch, to break the invisible barrier we both knew existed. Then, a sound. The door handle shifted, just slightly, as if someone on the other side was considering coming in. Her eyes snapped to the door, then back to me. In that single glance, there was no pretense, no mask. Only raw, unspoken tension, an invitation and a warning all at once. The handle stilled. Whoever it was hadn't entered. But the spell was broken, or perhaps only tightened, wound into something even sharper, waiting for release. She leaned back, her breath slow, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, they didn't let go of mine. And I realized then, I would never forget this moment. The door never opened. Whoever stood outside must have changed their mind, leaving only the echo of that half-second interruption behind. Yet it had done something, it had stripped away the comfortable distance we once pretended to keep. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she pushed the pen further from her hand as though the pretense of work had finally grown useless. Her blouse shifted when she leaned back again, and I noticed, for the first time, how tired her shoulders looked beneath all that poise. "You know," she said, her voice softer now, "I didn't plan on staying this late." There was no reason for her to say that to me, and yet she did. I leaned forward slightly, elbows on my knees, studying her expression in the faint desk light. For a moment, she didn't look like my boss, or the woman who everyone else in the office described as untouchable. She looked human. "You always stay later than you should," I said quietly. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh. "Bad habit." She glanced down at her hands, folding them together loosely. "Easier to bury yourself in work than deal with everything waiting outside these walls." The pause she left between words carried a weight I felt in my chest. She wasn't just talking about traffic or errands. Something heavier lived in her silence. "I get that," I answered, perhaps too quickly. Her eyes lifted, studying me, searching for something she hadn't expected to find. "You do?" I nodded, though I hesitated before speaking again. "It's easier to keep moving than to admit you're lonely." The word slipped out before I could stop it, and I regretted it instantly. But instead of dismissing it, her gaze softened. She leaned forward, close enough that I caught the faintest brush of her breath against my cheek. "Lonely," she repeated, almost to herself. My pulse raced. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Her nearness pulled me in, even though I knew, every instinct, every logical part of me knew, that this was dangerous. She was 20 years older. She was my superior. If anyone saw us like this, it wouldn't just be frowned upon, it would be impossible to explain. She must have felt it too, because she straightened, reclaiming that guarded space between us. But when her hand moved to the file on the desk, her fingers brushed mine, light, accidental, but deliberate enough that I knew she hadn't needed to touch me at all. I didn't move my hand right away. The air seemed to narrow to that single point of contact. Her skin was warm, soft, and she didn't pull away, not for a long moment. When she finally did, it was with a slowness that said everything her words refused to. She cleared her throat lightly, her composure sliding back into place. "We should both get some rest." But even as she said it, her eyes lingered on me, longer than they should have, her fingers curling slightly as if resisting the urge to reach for me again. And in that pause, in that breathless stretch of silence, something shifted. Not spoken, not acted upon, but undeniable. The elevator dinged faintly somewhere down the hall. Both of us froze. The office was supposed to be empty by now, but that sound reminded us the world hadn't vanished, no matter how much it felt like it had. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. For a moment, the tension cracked, not because it faded, but because it doubled. What if someone walked in? What if someone saw the blinds closed, the two of us sitting far too close? She shifted her chair back a fraction, but it wasn't enough to erase what had already happened. I leaned forward without meaning to, words tangled in my throat. "We should." Her phone lit up on the desk between us. A message. Just one. But the glow of it cut through the dim room like a warning. She reached for it quickly, almost too quickly, her fingers brushing the screen before she set it back down without opening it. Her jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter," she muttered. But it did. It mattered because her hand trembled, because she wasn't as composed as she wanted me to believe. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly. She looked at me then, truly looked, like I had stepped past some line I wasn't supposed to cross. Her lips parted, maybe to answer, maybe to stop me. Whatever it was, it caught in her throat. The silence between us pressed heavier now. She leaned forward, just slightly, enough that I caught the faint outline of her perfume again. Her eyes dropped to my mouth for the briefest second before she caught herself and looked away. Guilt surged in me, sharp and confusing. She was older, my boss, someone who carried more weight in her life than I could imagine. What would people think if they knew what hung in the air between us right now? What would I think of myself afterward? Still, I couldn't stop. Her hand was near the edge of the desk, mine hovering closer than it should. A breath away. I could see her fingers tense, like she was debating whether to close the distance or to pull away altogether. "You should go," she whispered, but the words came out softer than conviction. "I don't want to." Her eyes lifted again, slow, deliberate, locking onto mine. Every second stretched unbearably. I leaned forward, just a little too far, close enough that her breath brushed against my cheek. The moment trembled, waiting. And then, footsteps outside the hall. We both jerked back, too quickly, too guilty. The sound passed. No one came in. The office door stayed closed. But in the retreat, something worse happened. She reached across the desk, fingers curling over mine as if to keep me from vanishing entirely. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even an embrace. But it was more dangerous than both, because it was deliberate. Her hand lingered there, warm, firm, as if she was saying without words, "I'm resisting you, but not enough." And I couldn't move. Her hand lingered over mine too long to be dismissed as a slip. It was deliberate, undeniable. I felt the warmth of her skin seep into me, steady and unrelenting, even as her eyes betrayed the storm behind her calm. "I shouldn't," she whispered, almost to herself. The words cut through me, but she didn't let go. If anything, her grip tightened, her thumb brushing faintly against my knuckles. That small movement, that confession in silence, unraveled every restraint I'd been clinging to. "Then don't," I said quietly. My voice was lower than I intended, rough with something I couldn't contain. She blinked, startled not by the words but by the truth in them. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked unguarded, almost fragile beneath all the poise. A line had been crossed, and we both knew it. She pushed her chair back, standing abruptly, as if space would save her. But when she turned, I followed, rising without thinking. She stopped in front of the closed blinds, the faint city glow seeping through the cracks painting her profile in silver. "You don't understand what this could mean," she said, voice shaking, not with weakness, but with too much strength pressed into too small a frame. "Then tell me." I stepped closer, the air between us shrinking fast. "Tell me to walk away, and I will." Her breath caught. She didn't say it. Instead, she turned, facing me fully now. I was close enough to see the faint tremor of her lips, the flicker of her pupils darting between my eyes and my mouth. My chest tightened. If I leaned in just a fraction, if she let me, she reached up suddenly, fingers brushing against my face. Not tentative. Not hesitant. Her palm pressed gently against my cheek, grounding me even as it set me on fire. "You're too young," she breathed, but her hand didn't leave. "And you're too beautiful to hide behind excuses," I whispered back. My words hung between us, heavier than the air, reckless and raw. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears but with something sharper, something she had spent years burying. She stepped closer, so close the faint fabric of her blouse brushed against my arm. I could feel her warmth radiating through me, her perfume lacing the silence with something intimate, forbidden. "You'll regret this," she said, but her voice broke on the last word. "Not a chance." Her breath grazed my lips now, every heartbeat dragging us closer to something we couldn't undo. My hand rose almost of its own will, tucking a stray strand of her hair behind her ear. She didn't move. Didn't stop me. Her eyes fluttered shut for just a second, long enough to shatter me. And then, she opened them, locking onto mine with a force that nearly undid me. "Say it," she demanded, voice low, trembling with need and fear all at once. "I want you," I admitted, the words spilling raw, unpolished. The distance between us was gone, only a breath remained. Her lips parted, a sound caught in her throat. The next second would decide everything. And just as I leaned in, a sharp knock rattled the door. The knock at the door broke us apart, but not far enough. Her hand dropped from my cheek, mine slipped back to my side, yet the air still carried the shape of what almost happened. We stood frozen, breaths uneven, waiting for the door to open. It didn't. After a long pause, footsteps retreated down the hall. Whoever it was had heard nothing, or so I thought. She exhaled sharply, pressing her fingers against her lips as if trying to erase the moment. "We can't," her voice cracked, the sentence unfinished. She turned toward her desk, as if the neat stack of papers could shield her from what she was feeling. But then her phone lit up again. This time, she picked it up, unlocking the screen with a swipe that seemed too fast, too desperate. Her face stiffened. She held the phone out of sight for a moment, then placed it face down on the desk. "What is it?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer immediately, and that silence told me more than words could. Finally, she said, "Someone knows." The bottom dropped out of my chest. "Knows what?" She looked at me then, her eyes sharp but rimmed with something fragile. "About us. Or, what we almost did." "But we didn't," I whispered. "That doesn't matter," she said quickly, stepping toward me. The movement was too sudden, too close, and when she realized it, she stopped, close enough that the heat of her body brushed mine, close enough that I could see her hands trembling at her sides. "If word gets out, everything changes. My reputation. My job. Yours." The fear in her voice was real, but so was something else, something that made her reach up as if to push me away, only for her fingers to hover at my chest instead, not touching, but not pulling back either. My heart hammered beneath her palm. "Then tell me the truth," I said, softer now. "Do you want this to end before it begins? Or do you want me?" Her breath shuddered. She closed her eyes for a second too long, then whispered, "I've wanted you from the moment you walked into this office." The admission hit harder than the knock, harder than the message. My breath caught, and I couldn't stop myself. I stepped closer, erasing the sliver of space between us. Her eyes opened, locking onto mine, full of conflict and fire all at once. She pressed her hand flat against my chest, not pushing, not pulling, just feeling the thrum of my heartbeat beneath her fingers. "This is dangerous," she said, voice trembling. "So am I murmured. Her lips parted, a faint gasp escaping before she bit it back. She brushed past me then, deliberately close, her shoulder grazing mine, her perfume following in her wake. She stopped by the blinds, one hand lifting toward the cord but never pulling it. When she turned back, her eyes told me the decision had already been made, even if her lips hadn't spoken it yet. And in that charged silence, with fear and desire colliding like sparks, I knew, we were past the point of return. She stood by the blinds, her fingers curled loosely around the cord but unmoving. The faint light from the city bled through the slats, tracing lines across her face, sharpening the conflict written there. "This is the moment," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We either stop now, or we don't stop at all." My chest tightened. The weight of her words pressed harder than anything before. But the way she looked at me, eyes raw, unguarded, searching, betrayed her own indecision. She wanted me to make the choice, even if she couldn't say it. I stepped forward. One slow, steady stride. Then another. Her grip on the cord faltered, and when I was close enough, I reached up, my hand brushing against hers. The simple touch carried a voltage that nearly buckled my knees. "Tell me to go," I said softly, my breath grazing the edge of her cheek. "Say the words, and I'll walk out that door." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her body leaned back just slightly against the wall, yet she didn't pull her hand away from mine. "You don't understand," she breathed. "This isn't just desire. If I cross this line, there's no going back. You'll see me differently." "Maybe that's what I want," I murmured, my forehead lowering until it nearly touched hers. The room went still, every sound swallowed up by the gravity pulling us together. Her perfume, the warmth of her body, the subtle tremor in her breathing, it all wrapped around me, suffocating and intoxicating. Her hand slipped from the cord and pressed against my chest instead, feeling the thundering rhythm beneath. She didn't push. She didn't retreat. She simply rested there, as if confirming I was real, as if trying to anchor herself. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "So am I." My voice cracked on the words. "But I'm more terrified of walking away from this." Her eyes lifted, wide and vulnerable, the shield she always wore nowhere in sight. And then, slowly, she tilted her head, just enough. Her lips hovered near mine, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath, close enough to blur the line between what we should and shouldn't do. The air was thick, my pulse deafening. One more inch and everything would change. And in that suspended heartbeat, she made the choice. Her hand slid up from my chest to my neck, her fingers brushing the edge of my jaw with a tenderness that broke me open. Her lips didn't fully meet mine, not yet, but the intent was clear. No hesitation. No denial. The distance between us was no longer a question of if, only when. Her eyes locked onto mine, fierce and trembling all at once. I can't hide from this anymore. And I knew then, we were done pretending. Her hand lingered on my jaw, her breath trembling between us, and for a moment neither of us moved. It wasn't a kiss yet, but it didn't need to be. The closeness itself said more than words ever could. I let my forehead rest gently against hers. The world outside the blinds faded into nothing. There was only her, the faint warmth of her skin, the soft catch of her breath, the way her heartbeat seemed to echo mine. When she finally spoke, it was quiet, fragile, but steady. All this time, I told myself I couldn't, shouldn't. You're younger. People would talk. They'd never understand. Her words cracked something open in me. I pulled back just enough to see her eyes, to really look at her. The woman who had always carried herself with such poise now stood before me raw, uncertain, almost vulnerable. And yet, she was more beautiful than I had ever seen her. Let them talk, I said softly. They don't feel what I feel when I'm with you. They don't know the way you make me forget everything else. Her lips curved, just barely, into a smile that looked like surrender. Not defeat, freedom. I took her hand, carefully, lacing my fingers through hers. She didn't resist. Her grip tightened, as though she'd been waiting for that one small gesture all along. The silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of the things we'd left unsaid, full of the promise that neither of us could deny. She leaned into me then, resting her head against my shoulder. My arm instinctively wrapped around her, pulling her close, holding her like I'd never let go. We didn't need a kiss to seal it. The way she exhaled against my neck, the way her body finally softened into mine, that was enough. It was an answer. I don't know what tomorrow will look like, she murmured. Then we'll figure it out, I whispered back. Her laugh was quiet, almost disbelieving, but when she lifted her gaze to mine again, it was filled with something new. Trust. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, tucking it gently behind her ear, my fingertips lingering for just a second longer than necessary. And this time, she didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her cheek slightly, letting my hand cradle her face as if she'd been waiting for that touch all along. The moment was soft, not rushed. Not desperate. Just right. Two people, different ages, different lives, but somehow meeting in the same place at the same time, choosing each other, despite it all. I pressed a kiss to her forehead, slow and steady. When she closed her eyes and smiled faintly, I knew the story had changed. It wasn't about fear anymore. It wasn't about rules or doubts. It was about us. And for the first time, that was enough.